Amber Wells walked into the cafe that morning with a breath so careful it almost trembled, the kind that comes from equal parts nerves and hope. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and coffee. The wooden floors whispered under each hesitant step, and the pale green walls wore age beautifully, their surfaces dressed in vintage picture frames that caught the sunlight like faded memories. In the corner sat a piano, its keys waiting silently for a song that had not yet been chosen. The cafe was the meeting spot set up by a dating app, though Amber had never been fond of blind dates or the strange promise they carried. Her best friend had pushed her into it, insisting that maybe, just maybe, one morning might change everything. "It's just an hour," her friend had told her. "You might surprise yourself." And so she came, a widow, a mother, a woman who had learned how to fold her loneliness quietly into her days. Dressed in the simple blue dress she'd picked 2 nights earlier, hair drawn back in a soft blonde ponytail that caught the light when she turned her head, she scanned the room, found the table marked reserved, and noticed only one chair pulled out. She hesitated, smoothing the fabric of her dress before approaching. The cafe was neither empty nor busy, but humming in that in-between state where everything feels possible. As she drew nearer, she noticed something unexpected. Not a man waiting for her, but a little girl in a pink dress, her small legs swinging under the chair, gaze fixed on the window as though she were watching the world outside, move in secret patterns only she could understand. Amber paused, uncertain. "Sweetheart, are you waiting for someone?" she asked softly, her voice carrying warmth but no intrusion. The child turned, dark eyes locking onto Amber's with a quiet intensity that startled her. There was something old in that look, something thoughtful and knowing. "You look like someone from my dreams," the girl whispered, almost reverently. Amber blinked, unsure how to respond, but felt a curious tenderness unfold inside her. For a fleeting moment, she wasn't the invisible woman in the back row of life. She was seen. "Thank you," Amber said, smiling gently. "I didn't expect such sweet company." The girl tilted her head as if measuring trust, and then placed her small hand over Amber's. "You have Mommy's hair," she said with a conviction that sent a strange ache through Amber's chest. Amber's breath caught. She knelt beside the table so she could meet the girl's eyes properly, noticing the innocence wrapped in quiet grief. "Where's your dad, sweetheart?" she asked. The girl's gaze shifted toward the empty chair across from Amber. "He's coming," she said. "He's always serious when he's alone. Will you stay just for a bit, please?" There was so much earnest hope in that tiny voice that Amber could only nod. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." Moments later, the door opened, letting in a rush of cold air and a man with the kind of presence that changed the temperature of a room. He was tall, sharply dressed in a charcoal suit, his coat draped over one arm, shoes polished but understated. Everything about him spoke of discipline, not vanity but control. He paused, scanning the cafe until his eyes found the table, the child, and then Amber. For a fraction of a second, his expression faltered. "Daddy, doesn't she look like Mommy?" the little girl called out, her voice ringing across the quiet room. Several heads turned. The man froze, caught mid-step, and Amber, cheeks burning, rose immediately. "I'm so sorry," she began. "I thought this table was mine. I didn't mean to intrude." But the man lifted a hand, stopping her apology before it fully formed. "You're at the right table," he said gently, his tone soft yet sure. She hesitated, confused, as he approached and pulled out the chair for her with quiet courtesy. "Please," he said. "Sit." She obeyed, uncertain but strangely unable to walk away. His daughter, Emma, as Amber would soon learn, smiled with relief as though she had been waiting for this moment to unfold exactly as it did. The man, Logan, took his seat opposite Amber, his gaze moving from his daughter's bright face to the woman across from him. There was something unreadable in his eyes, curiosity, grief, maybe even recognition. Amber felt it too, a whisper of something larger than coincidence. The cafe's hum softened around them, the morning sunlight painting golden stripes across the table, where a small vase of daisies leaned toward the window. Emma stirred her hot chocolate with a slow, deliberate motion, creating a tiny whirlpool of cream, while Logan's hand rested around his untouched coffee, like a man holding on to memory. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Emma broke the stillness with a question that seemed too big for her small voice. "Do you think people in heaven miss us too?" The words were gentle but heavy, and they landed between them with the weight of shared loss. Logan's jaw tightened, his eyes dropping to the table. He said nothing. Amber, moved by instinct more than thought, reached across the table and laid her hand over Emma's. "I think they do," she said softly. "That's why they send us reminders, Ma, a favorite song on the radio, a scent that lingers, a kindness from a stranger." Emma listened with the seriousness of someone far older than her years, her dark eyes wide and wet. Then she smiled faintly, and for the first time since she had sat down, Amber saw light return to her face. Logan exhaled, not in relief exactly, but in something close. His shoulders lowered, his mouth lifted at one corner, and the silence between them began to breathe. Emma noticed and pointed, delighted.
"Daddy laughed,"
she declared. Logan met Amber's gaze almost shyly, and for a heartbeat it felt as though time slowed enough to let something fragile take root. The three of them began to talk, tentatively at first. Emma led the conversation, as children do, jumping from one story to the next. About her drawing of a spaceship shaped like a shoe, about her favorite stuffed elephant, about the goldfish named Ella that Amber's own daughter had recently begged to adopt. Amber laughed genuinely, her voice weaving warmth into the morning. Logan watched her, not in the way of a man assessing attraction, but in quiet wonder at how someone could walk into his grief and make it breathe again. Hours seemed to bend around them. The plates emptied, the cafe quieted, and sunlight mellowed into a honeyed glow that caught in Amber's hair. When she finally checked the time, she sighed softly. "I should go," she said. "My daughter will be home soon, and I promised pancakes." Emma's face fell immediately, her small hands gripping the cocoa cup. Logan stood, his chair scraping gently against the wood. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for making Emma smile like that." His voice carried something unpolished, gratitude, pain, the first hint of healing. "She makes it easy," Amber replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Their eyes met briefly, a shared acknowledgement that something in this accidental morning had mattered more than either could explain. Emma hopped down and ran to hug Amber. "Will you come back?" she asked, voice muffled against her shoulder. "We'll make space for you." Amber hugged her tightly. "Only if you save some whipped cream for me next time," she whispered. Emma giggled and nodded. Logan watched the two of them, and for the first time since losing his wife, he felt the quiet stir of something like hope. When Amber stepped outside, the air was cool and alive with the scent of rain that hadn't yet arrived. She walked a few blocks before stopping to breathe, her cheeks warm, her heart strangely light. For the first time in months, the world seemed less empty. Behind her, Logan sat back at the cafe table, watching the light shift across the window. He touched the rim of his coffee cup and realized it no longer felt cold. Something had changed, subtly, irreversibly. He closed the small book he'd brought to read, no longer interested in its words, and instead looked at the spot where Amber had sat, the faint imprint of her presence lingering like a held note. Emma chatted beside him about the new friend she'd made, her voice animated. Logan smiled faintly and thought, maybe this was not chance at all. Later that afternoon, after finishing her shift at the bakery where she worked part-time, Amber stepped out into the same cool air, apron folded over one arm. The street was quiet now, touched by late light. She was fishing for her phone when she noticed a small figure curled up near the cafe window. A little girl in a pink dress, her backpack hugged tightly to her chest. Amber's heart jolted. "Emma," she whispered, hurrying over. The girl lifted her face streaked with tears. "Sweetheart, what are you doing here? Where's your dad?" Emma blinked up, eyes red-rimmed. "He had to take a call. I didn't want to go. I thought maybe you'd come back." Amber's chest tightened. She knelt, gathering Emma close. "Oh, honey," she murmured. "You shouldn't be out here alone." Emma's small hands clutched Amber's sleeve. "I didn't want the morning to end," she said, voice trembling. Amber smoothed the girl's curls, her heart breaking at the sincerity in those few words. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the best things don't end. They just wait for us to find them again." Logan appeared moments later, breathless, eyes wide with worry until he saw his daughter safe in Amber's arms. He slowed, his voice low and rough with guilt. "I turned around and she was gone." "I'm so sorry," Amber shook her head. Amber barely heard the soft voice at first. "I left school," the girl murmured, eyes downcast. "I just wanted to see you." Amber's chest tightened at the sight of her, Emma, small and trembling, the sadness in her voice far too heavy for her age. "Oh, sweetheart," Amber whispered, reaching out as Emma's lips quivered. "They said I don't have a mom because she didn't love me enough to stay." The words struck Amber like a blow. For a long second she couldn't speak, only watch this fragile little soul fighting back tears that should never have existed. Without thinking, she sank down beside her, wrapped her arms around her and held her close. "That's not true," she whispered into Emma's hair. "Sometimes people leave not because they stop loving, but because life doesn't give them another choice." Emma didn't reply. She just pressed her face against Amber's sweater, her small body shaking. Gently, Amber reached for her phone and called Logan. He picked up instantly. "She's safe," Amber said before he could speak. "But you need to come right now." 15 minutes later, tires screeched outside the cafe. Logan rushed in, eyes scanning wildly until they landed on Emma. "Emma," he breathed, relief and fury mixing in his voice as he strode toward them. "You can't just disappear like that. Do you know how scared I was?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. Before she could crumble, Amber stood and stepped between them. "She didn't run to hide," she said softly. "She ran to be understood." The words hit Logan with quiet force. He blinked, his anger fading as he finally saw his daughter, really saw her. The weight she carried, the loneliness she hadn't dared to voice. He knelt and pulled her into his arms. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't hear how lonely you were." Emma clung to him, her tiny arms wrapped tight around his neck. Then she turned slightly toward Amber and said, "She listens, like Mommy used to." Amber's eyes filled, though she managed a trembling smile and brushed Emma's hair. Logan rose, still holding his daughter, and turned to Amber. "Thank you," he said roughly, "for being there when she needed someone." Amber gave a small nod, but when he hesitated and asked, "Can I take you to dinner just to say thank you?" She smiled faintly and shook her head. "Not today," she said softly. "But thank you." Logan didn't push. He just nodded as she walked away, Emma peeking over his shoulder to watch her. "Will we see her again, Daddy?" she asked. Logan looked down the street where Amber disappeared and finally murmured, "I hope so." The following weekend, the park buzzed with laughter for Family Day, a school event full of balloons, games, and picnics. Amber hadn't known about it. She'd only come to unwind with her daughter Ella after a long shift. Ella, 4 years old with bouncy brown curls and a pale yellow dress, spotted the sandbox immediately. "Mommy, can I play?" she asked, already halfway there. "Of course," Amber laughed. "Just don't throw sand this time." In the sandbox sat another little girl in a pink dress, Emma. They eyed each other for a moment until Emma smiled. "Your hair looks like hers," she said, pointing to Amber. "Are you her daughter?" Ella nodded. "Then we're kind of sisters." Within moments, the two were building sandcastles, giggling and sharing buckets as if they'd known each other forever. Amber smiled from the bench, content until soft murmurs reached her. "Isn't that the waitress from the diner?" "She's with the CEO's daughter." "How convenient." The words froze her. Then came a sharper voice behind her, smooth, condescending. "So this is how you climb the ladder? Through your daughter's playdates?" Amber turned. A woman in designer sunglasses stood there, arms crossed, disdain radiating from her. Amber couldn't find words. She called softly to Ella. "Come on, honey, time to go." Ella pouted. "But we're not done." Amber lifted her, ready to leave, when Logan's voice broke through the air. "I heard everything." He stood a few feet away, eyes blazing. He faced the woman coldly. "If your child had half the kindness of hers," he said, nodding toward Amber, "I might actually respect you." The woman gaped, speechless. Logan didn't wait. He caught up to Amber, who had stopped, her back still turned. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "No one should speak to you that way." Amber's voice was low. "People like me don't belong in parks like that, or at tables like yours." Logan took a step closer. "Then maybe it's time I stop sitting at tables where kindness isn't served." She finally looked at him, their eyes meeting, his filled with regret, hers with disbelief and a flicker of warmth. "Emma and Ella," she said softly. "They understand each other so easily. It's the grown-ups who make things hard." He nodded. "Maybe it's time we learn from them." Ella squirmed in Amber's arms. "Can we come back and play again?" Amber hesitated, glancing at Logan. He smiled faintly. "Any time." She set Ella down and the two girls ran off laughing again. For once, Amber didn't leave, and neither did Logan. After that day, Emma couldn't stop talking about Ella. Every morning, every bedtime, she asked the same question. Can we see them again? Ella and her mommy? Logan hesitated, unsure of what this was becoming. But one night, after tucking Emma in beside a crayon drawing of the two girls, he realized maybe the best things don't fit neatly into logic. So he called Amber. Maybe dinner? Just something simple. The four of us. There was a pause on the other end. Simple? She asked warily. Nothing fancy, he promised. Just dinner. There's a small place on Maple Street. In the background, he heard Ella's voice. Mommy, is it Emma? Are we going? Amber sighed softly. All right, she said. Just dinner. The restaurant was small and warm, tucked between a florist and a bookstore, its golden lights flickering gently. Emma spotted Ella first, ran up and grabbed her hand as if they'd never been apart. I saved you a seat. She giggled. Amber smiled as she slid into the booth across from Logan. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, just a trace of color on her lips. Logan watched her quietly. She looked tired, but there was a quiet strength in her, something real, unpolished, grounding. The girls chattered endlessly about school, pets, and the goldfish Ella once named Banana. Logan chuckled. Amber listened with the same patient warmth that seemed to draw people in. For the first time, Logan realized Amber's calm mirrored his daughter's gentle soul. When the girls ran to the gumball machine, Amber leaned back and sighed. I didn't plan for this, she said. My life's messy. Logan stirred his coffee. Maybe messy just means real, he said. I've had enough of perfect. Amber looked down. Ella asked me once why she didn't have a dad like the others. I told her. Some stories start with one hero, but that doesn't mean they end that way. Logan said nothing, only twisted a sugar packet in his fingers. Outside, rain began to fall, soft and steady. When they left, puddles shimmered under the streetlights. Emma squealed as the raindrops hit her face. We're getting wet. Logan smiled, shrugged off his coat, and wrapped it around both girls before scooping Emma up and taking Ella's hand. Amber blinked, surprised at how natural it looked. No hesitation, no awkwardness, just care. She walked beside them, the four of them sharing one umbrella of laughter. By the time they reached his car, everyone was soaked, but no one complained. Amber watched as Logan gently buckled Ella in. You didn't have to carry her, she said softly. He met her eyes with a faint smile. I wanted to. Something inside her shifted then, a fragile warmth she hadn't felt in years. Maybe not all beautiful things were meant to fade, but the peace didn't last. The next morning, the internet erupted. Photos from their dinner. Logan, Amber, the girls laughing, plastered across every site. Headlines screamed, widowed CEO seen dining with single mom and her child, new family in the making. Within hours, her past was dragged into daylight. Old jobs, unfinished school, and eviction, all twisted into a story of opportunism, unqualified, gold digger, manipulative. The words cut deeper than any truth. At Logan's company, the boardroom air was thick with judgment. Mr. Cole, the chairwoman said coolly, your personal life is becoming a distraction. Optics matter. Investors are watching. Logan's jaw tightened. So a dinner is a liability now? Your late wife came from legacy, she replied. This woman does not. He said nothing. When the meeting ended, he loosened his tie and walked out without a word. That night, Amber sat in silence before the small TV as a reporter chirped too brightly. Who is Amber Wells? A small-town waitress with a complicated past. Does she belong beside one of the city's most powerful men? On the floor, Ella played with her stuffed giraffe, unaware. Amber turned off the TV, hands trembling as she folded her daughter's clothes into a small bag. She knew this routine. Leaving before the world could break her worse. She was zipping the duffel when a knock came. Logan stood in the doorway, drenched from rain. He didn't wait for permission. His eyes swept over the room, the packed bag, the fear on her face. You shouldn't be here, she said. I saw the news. I'm leaving before it gets worse. Worse for who? He asked quietly. For you, she said, her voice shaking. You have a reputation. I just have Ella. Logan stepped closer, rain dripping from his coat. And you think my daughter needs shareholders more than someone who listens, who cares? She tried to reply, but nothing came out. They say you don't belong in my world, he whispered. But the truth is, I stopped belonging in that world a long time ago. Amber's defenses finally gave way. Outside, the storm screamed through the night, rattling the windows and washing the city in silver light. But it was nothing compared to the storm unraveling inside her. Grief, fear, and the fragile tremor of hope clashed in her chest until all she could do was breathe through the ache. She listens to me, Amber whispered at last, her voice so soft it almost disappeared under the rain. Emma listens. That's all I've ever wanted. Someone to feel heard. Logan nodded slowly, eyes heavy with something she couldn't name. She told me, he said quietly, that you listen the way her mother used to. Amber bit her lip, the weight of that sentence pressing against her ribs. I don't want to replace anyone, she murmured. You're not, Logan replied simply. You're the first person who showed up without wanting anything in return. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, the silence between them tender and fragile. Then from the back of the apartment, a small voice drifted through the air. Mommy, is the rain talking to someone? Ella's sleepy question made Amber laugh through her tears. Logan smiled faintly. Tell her, he said. It's just someone who's done running. The backyard wasn't much, just a worn patch of grass hemmed in by a tired wooden fence, a folding table dressed with a floral tablecloth, and a few balloons swaying lazily in the spring wind. But to Emma and Ella it was everything. A kingdom of color and laughter and the kind of joy that made the air itself shimmer. Their birthdays were 10 days apart, and after weeks of pleading and secret plans whispered under covers and between school breaks, they had convinced their parents to throw one big celebration. Like real sisters, Emma had said, with the kind of certainty only children possess, as if the stars had already agreed. Amber had hesitated. It felt too soon, too intimate, too much like opening a door she wasn't sure she could close again. Sharing space, memories, even a cake, it all meant lowering her guard. But Logan had looked at her with that steady patience of his and said softly, it would mean the world to them. There was no demand in his voice, only truth. So here they were. The party was small, deliberately so. A few neighbors, a handful of Emma's classmates, and an old golden retriever from next door who refused to miss the fun. No fancy catering, no photo shoots, just homemade cupcakes balanced on mismatched plates, bright streamers fluttering above, and a happiness that couldn't be faked or bought. Amber set out juice boxes on a tray, her gaze drifting to the girls spinning barefoot in the grass, their dresses, pink for Emma, yellow for Ella, twirling like petals. Their laughter ricocheted off the fence and came back doubled, filling the air like music. Logan arrived carrying 2 carefully wrapped gifts. He crouched down and handed the first to Emma, a thick sketchbook tied with ribbon and a tin of colored pencils. For all the dreams you haven't drawn yet, he said, his tone tender. Emma hugged it like it was a secret treasure. The second gift he gave to Ella, a bright red toy medical kit with a stethoscope, bandages, and a name tag that read Dr. Ella. Because your mom once dreamed of helping people too, he added, glancing at Amber with a quiet smile. Ella's eyes went wide. Really? She asked, and Amber nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Really, she said, her voice trembling just a little. Soon the girls were playing doctor and patient, dissolving into giggles over invisible fevers and imaginary rescues. Just as Amber carried out the cake, she paused, pulled a small velvet box from her purse, and called for everyone's attention. Before we cut the cake, she said softly, I have something for both of you. Emma and Ella ran to her, frosting still clinging to their fingers. Inside the box lay 2 delicate heart-shaped pendants, each engraved with the same words. You were never missing. You were always meant to find each other. For a breathless moment, everything stilled. Emma blinked rapidly, her lips trembling. Ella clutched her pendant like it was something celestial. Then, without hesitation, the 2 girls threw their arms around each other, their tiny bodies shaking with the kind of tears only children cry, pure, healing, and full of truth. Amber knelt and pulled them both close, pressing her forehead gently against theirs. Logan knelt too, the moment swallowing them whole. Emma looked up, her lashes wet, and whispered, Now we both have a mommy and a daddy. Amber's breath caught. Logan's voice broke when he said, You've given us more than a family, Amber. You gave us back our hearts. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Around them, balloons swayed gently, soft music hummed from a tiny speaker, and a cake waited patiently on the table. It was a moment too full for words, one where love didn't need to announce itself. It just needed to be there quietly, completely, with room for one more candle to glow beside another. Months later, the cafe looked nothing like it once had. The tired red awnings had been replaced with soft cream ones that fluttered gently in the breeze. Pots of lavender, marigolds, and wild daisies sat along the windowsills, each one hand-painted in messy, bright colors by Emma and Ella on a lazy Sunday afternoon. Inside, sunlight poured through spotless windows, gilding the wooden tables with warmth. Every corner carried the feeling of renewal. Amber moved behind the counter with her sleeves rolled up, her hair tied loosely, the rhythm of her motions calm and practiced. She poured warm milk into 2 mugs, steam curling up like gentle sighs between her and the girls. Ella, in her favorite yellow dress, reached eagerly for her cup, cradling it as if it were magic. Across from her, Emma tapped out a tune on a small toy piano near the window, the morning light glowing pink across her dress. The cafe had become more than a business, it was a heartbeat, a ritual, a sanctuary. After the former owner had retired, a local community group that helped single mothers saw something special in Amber. Her quiet strength, her grace, the way she turned ordinary moments into something sacred. They offered her the chance to take over the lease. She didn't just accept. She transformed the place. It became a haven where neighbors left dog-eared books on a shared shelf. Toddlers curled up on floor cushions with picture books, and teenagers filled the big table in back with homework and laughter. Birthdays were celebrated with muffins and candles, and love letters found their way onto napkins. The cafe didn't just serve coffee, it served belonging. One morning after the rush had faded, Logan walked through the door. His tie was loosened, his hair tousled by the wind, and for a moment he simply stood there watching. The scene before him, the soft light, the laughter, the smell of fresh pastries, was everything he once thought he'd lost. Amber looked up and met his gaze with a knowing smile. "Running late?" she teased gently, nodding toward the untouched cup waiting near the espresso machine. He grinned, that familiar crooked grin. "Your coffee's worth being late for." Then came Emma's voice, high and bright. "Daddy, our table's still here." She dashed across the floor, leaping into his arms. He caught her easily, kissed the top of her head, and carried her back to the table where Ella was giggling, her small hand still wrapped around her mug. Logan sat, taking in the scene, the soft clink of cups, the light pooling like honey across the table, Amber tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear, the girls laughing about something only they understood. "The sunlight," he said quietly, almost to himself. "It spills across the table like honey." Amber met his eyes, her smile soft and certain. "It always will," she replied. They didn't need more words. The air between them was already full, with everything they'd lost, everything they'd built, and everything they'd become. There were no grand declarations left to make, no promises spoken under arches or signed on papers. Their love lived in smaller places, in breakfast cocoa and bedtime giggles, in sketches taped to the refrigerator, in the sound of rain tapping against windows, while they read stories under a shared blanket. The world outside still hurried, but inside the cafe, time seemed to exhale. The camera would pull back slowly, catching the glow of the morning light, the soft hum of the espresso machine, the 2 girls whispering secrets over cocoa foam. At that table meant for 4, a family sat whole again, imperfect, unplanned, but real. They had built something lasting, not out of certainty but out of care. It was never about second chances or perfect timing. It was about showing up again and again, until love stopped being something to find and started being something they lived. And so they stayed there, forever, one morning at a time. If this story touched your heart, the way a child's words can crack open silence, the way kindness can grow from ruin, and the way love sometimes finds its way back through the smallest acts, share it. Remind someone that hope is never gone. Sometimes all it takes is one smile, one table, and the courage to stay.